Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thanks very much for coming along for this special sneak peek session where we get to pull the covers back on one of the more new and exciting releases that we've got for you for this quarter. My name's Geoff McQueen. I'm the founder and CEO of AffinityLive, and today I'm going to take you through a new module, or actually a major upgrade to an existing module, if you like, our new Contracts and Retainers module. So this is very brand new. You guys are seeing something which is still in a development-only environment, so like all live demos, it's quite likely to have its own little hiccups. But what I wanted to do was run you through it, show you some of the new features that we've got coming out, and really focus, instead of on features, I really want to focus on how you and your business can take advantage of this new powerful tool to increase your, the ease of running your business, as well as making it much easier to generate recurring or referral or residual revenue for your business. So without any further ado, let's jump into the actual session. In terms of what we're going to cover, the process we're going to go through, I'm going to first of all cover the big picture, how the Contracts and Retainers module fits in. I'm then going to run through a demo and highlight a few things, and I just wanted to mention what they are now so you could keep them in the back of your mind and keep an eye out for them. The first thing I'm going to show you in the demo is how you're able to actually do work directly on a contract or a retainer, something that wasn't previously possible in the current, more limited version of this module. But this new supercharged, remodeled version makes it easy for your support, your consulting, your retainer service users to be able to go through and just log work directly against a retainer you're doing for a customer, and make it much easier for you to keep track of the time that gets spent and then bill customers for that. I'm also going to introduce something I know is going to be popular with a lot of folks, the ability for AffinityLive to track and manage recurring tasks for that regular client work you do. So if there's a customer you work with on a regular basis, let's say it's someone every month you do the same 3 or 4 tasks for them, with the new Contracts and Retainers module, you'll be able to create those tasks and have them set up, specified, organized, and also forecast, so that you're able to very easily see what's going on and keep track of the work that you do with a high degree of frequency. I'm also going to introduce a new feature we're calling inclusions. This is basically the ability to put non-time-based revenue and line items on your recurring or retainer work. Now, we know this is going to be really, really exciting for folks who are in areas like IT consulting, where they've got third-party licenses and contracts that they want to be able to invoice customers for on a frequent basis. For any of our web dev companies who want to be able to have things like maybe it's web hosting or other fixed non-time-based costs as part of their monthly, quarterly, or whatever the frequency is of retainer or support contract you provide, this is going to be great for you as well. And beyond that, there's also the opportunity to add on, if you like, if you're not doing that kind of work at the moment, the ability to very easily add on or resell products to your customers and be able to manage the ongoing billing of those in a way that's never been possible for you before. Another thing we know is going to make administrators and people who are responsible for organizing things really happy and excited is our automatic renewal of periods. So if you're not familiar with the module at all, I'll explain what a period means in a minute, but basically what it means for you as a user is that if you specify that each month you have a certain number of hours or a certain series of things that you're able to do for a client, and you want to not be the one who's stuck on the first of the month having to madly tick all the boxes so that your staff are able to go through and log their work or do their activities. The good news is this automatic functionality will take that pain away from you and will automatically, optionally, obviously, allow you to automatically renew each of the contracts on their monthly or quarterly basis. Another feature which goes hand in hand with the automatic renewal is also automatic invoicing. So you can basically start making money on the beach. You can have yourself a renewable contract, such as a monthly or monthly or quarterly support contract. Maybe you've got a few different inclusions on there, and bang, it could be a Sunday afternoon and the invoices automatically get spat out and you don't have to do any work. And the other thing that's important in the time-saving area is we've introduced a whole new system for reviewing, approving, and updating the time that's being logged against retainers or against the things that they connect to, such as their issues or their jobs/projects. The great thing about that is you're able to very easily drag and drop time around, move things to fit into different time periods, and approve hours all from one screen. and I'm looking forward to showing you that too. Last thing, in terms of a little bit of housekeeping with this webinar format, there's an ask a question feature. I noticed someone's actually got their hand raised at the moment, but it's very difficult for me to actually unmute everybody individually. But if you do have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to throw those into the ask a question box, which is part of the GoToWebinar interface you've got there. So just feel free to punch in your question. They'll only come through to myself and my team here to answer. But it's great if you ask questions as we go through. Of course, there'll be time at the end for raising any questions you've got. But if we're on a screen and you're like, oh, well, how does this happen? Or how does that happen? Or can I do this with it? That's certainly a great place and a great time to ask. All right, so let's look at the big picture quickly. So in terms of how it all fits together, AffinityLive is really all about the work you do for clients. So this in this diagram here, you can see this section in blue is really all about the client work that you do. So you can see your companies, contact notes, and other details. So this is who your clients actually are. And then, of course, you actually have the work that you do for them. So underneath the client, you would have things that hang off them, such as a sales or a proposal, an opportunity you're trying to close. And against that sale, you're able to keep track of attachments, notes, custom fields, value of the deal, all that sort of stuff. Hopefully, of course, that sale then turns into a project or you win the deal. And then, of course, you've got the ability to attach projects against a client and manage the work that you do for those clients in a project or a plan sense. In addition, AffinityLive supports the ability to have issues or reactive types of work that you do for customers. So whereas a project is really the proactive stuff where you go in with a plan and a series of milestones and a series of budgets and components, with an issue it tends to be more reactive. It tends to be smaller work, although it doesn't necessarily mean that it's over more quickly. And so that's the issues module. It allows you to track, support, bug requests, fixes, tasks, anything little that comes up and that you react to. And then, of course, in purple here, we've got the request module, which is really a gateway or a triage place. It's where customers are able to drop in via email or the extranet a question about something or a request for an answer. And then, of course, you can promote those into issues, or you can just leave them there as requests and get rid of them. Now, what the contracts module does is it really sits underneath this projects and issues area, or at least that's a part of how it fits in. So the idea is, with a contract is something you do for a particular client, and it usually provides this concept like a bucket of hours or a bucket of value, which then when work is done against projects and issues, that work can be pushed off or slid across into the actual contract itself and can eat up or utilize some of that bucket of support. So in the example where you had, for example, a monthly support contract, you might have 3 different months or what we call periods here, because it doesn't necessarily have to be a month. It could be a quarter. It could be 32 days. It doesn't matter what you call things. But these periods here are basically the buckets of available time and value which sit underneath the contract and roll on through the life of the contract. As I mentioned at the top, we've actually done a lot of work to improve and make this even easier to use. So whereas before, whenever you did work and you wanted to apply it to a contract, it had to go through via a project or an issue. Now when you want to do work and apply it to a contract, you can actually do it directly against the contract. You don't have to go through that project or issue phase, which is really good as a time saver. The other thing that we've done, as mentioned, is made sure that these periods here are able to be automatically renewed from period 1, create period 2, and then create period 3 as time goes by. And we're also able to attach non-time elements. So whereas there used to be a bucket of hours, for example, or a bucket of financial, like money that you would eat up as you did your work and did time billing, with these contract periods now, we're able to go through and actually have non-time guys living there, such as licenses or hosting fees or other services that you may want to tack on which are not related to the time you and your staff spend. All right, so now we probably want to jump across, and what you've all been waiting for is to actually see this thing in action. So let me just change my screens here in the control panel. Excellent. And I'll wait for things to catch up on your end there. We'll actually go through the live demo here. Okay, so this is a development environment of AffinityLive. So as I mentioned, it's got every chance that something's going to go wrong. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through how the new Contracts and Retainers module works. So what I've done is I've created a dummy company here called Acme Vacation Rentals. These guys are a customer of ours, and I'm going to pretend for this demo that as a business, we provide a series of digital services, digital marketing services for our clients. And in this case, I'm going to focus on SEO, which is one of those digital marketing services that never really ends. There's always changes in your competition. There's always changes in search engines. And basically, it's one of those ones that's really well suited to having an ongoing retainer-based service model applied to it. So what I'm going to do here is I've already created this client here, this Acme Vacation Rentals. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to add a new retainer to this client. So again, just to reiterate that, what we're doing is we're taking a client account and we're creating a retainer or an ongoing service offering. So I come in here and I go to create my retainer, and the first thing that it does, it says, okay, here's your client, Acme Vacation, that's great. And then I can give it a title, and I might call it SEO for acmevacations.com. This title here can be anything you want it to be. Some of our users in the past have used titles to represent domain names that they're using if they're a digital agency. Some IT services firms use these contract titles to represent the physical location of the particular site that they're doing the support work for. With our clients who are in more the legal fraternity or in the accounting sector, those guys have often used contract titles or retainer titles to represent file numbers or the service offering for the entity that they're doing their work for. So you can put in your title here. You designate who your default, if you like, staff member is who's managing that work. You can see who the primary contact at the client side is. We can also see our retainer type. So if you are using multiple types, which people on the premium version of Affinity are, you can actually designate different types of retainers. And when you change retainer types, you can actually then have different business processes and custom fields take shape. And I'm just going to leave it with the default here, which is the SEO. And I'm going to say that in this case, we've actually had the customer approve it. So at this point in time, I'm probably creating this retainer after I've done a sales process, sent through a proposal to the client, and they've signed off on, let's say, a 12-month SEO program that we're going to provide for them. So I'll come in here and I'll choose my start date. I'll choose my end date. So I'll say it's a 12-month program, so I'm able to just type in the dates there. As you know, you can change any formats of these dates that you like. And then this is where some of the new cool stuff comes in. So I'm going to say that I want to automatically renew the period. So every time this particular, whether it's a monthly or a quarterly bucket of period of work gets filled up, I'm going to automatically renew those until I reach my expiry date. And of course, you can leave that expiry date empty if you want the contract to roll on until the point the customer cancels or you decide you're going to retire and live on a beach somewhere. We've also got the option for automatically invoicing. So automatic invoicing is great in scenarios where you know what your bill or your invoice to the customer is going to be in advance. If, however, you've got variable components, such as the inclusions that you have might be different amounts, you probably want to wait and invoice things manually just so you can touch those up. That's useful in cases where maybe you're on-selling something which has a usage fee attached to it, and it depends on how popular or successful the website is or how many sort of extra things that a customer gets you to do you bill for. But in this case, I'm going to say that we're going to auto-bill, auto-invoice this client. And so all of that stuff is kind of like the high-level rules around the retainer itself. And now we get into how we want to bill and what we want to include in each of the periods. So these are each of those buckets that in this case are going to be on a monthly basis. So we can say, okay, every month, so we're going to have a fixed duration that lasts for 1 month. We're going to say that we're going to have a prepaid bill go to the customer for $795 worth of work. That's going to include an allowance of 5 hours worth of work. And that if they go over that 5 hours, we're going to charge the hourly rate out at $225 an hour. If the customer only uses 3 hours of retainer-based support or services this month, we're not going to roll over. We're not going to transition the remaining 2 hours of the 5 across onto the next month's period. So that's what these settings here mean. And there's options for things like you can just find that you want to have an unlimited time period rather than have a series of monthly or quarterly retainers. You can designate whether it's prepaid or postpaid. So in the case of postpaid, that's where you want to just be able to define what the billable rate is. And then at the end of a month, depending on how many hours the customer had, that's what the bill is. The prepaid price here can be designated, you can put any number in here that you like. And then you can also designate the allowance, whether they get an unlimited allowance of time. So can they have unlimited hours? Can they have a fixed set of hours, or can they have a fixed set of value? The main difference between fixed hours and fixed value really comes down to how you want to differentiate the billable rates of different parts of your team. So if one of your team members is really expensive per hour because their skills are very specialized, you might instead want to go for a fixed value arrangement and say that the customer, for example, gains or has $1,500 worth of value that they can eat up. This is kind of like what mobile phone companies do with their capped plans. They say, okay, we're going to charge you this and we're going to allow for this here in terms of the actual amount of value that's consumed or available until you go over your excess. But I'll go back to fixed hours because that's a bit easier to get our head around. Now, all of these numbers here, these 1 month and these prepaid hours, these have all been populated because we chose to type SEO when we're looking at our project types. That's really cool because what it means is as a business owner or as an admin, you're able to go through and configure your different offerings and your packages and your prices. And then when your staff members, maybe it's someone in your sales team goes through, they can create this retainer, choose from the drop-down list, and all of this stuff will be automatically pre-filled. There's nothing further for them to stress about, think about, or for that matter, make a mistake about. So in addition to these hours here, we can also see now that we've got this concept of the recurring tasks. So we can see that we've got template tasks here where we have 3 of these built into AffinityLive. We can see that there's a task here called leading keyword competitors. So what that is in an SEO sense is where each month, because this is a monthly retainer, what we're saying is that somebody's going to have 1 hour to do some research into their competitors and find out who on behalf of this client is bidding high or doing well for a certain set of keywords. We've got another task here which is also set to go for 1 hour where somebody goes into, let's say, Google Analytics, which is what the GA abbreviation means. They go into Google Analytics and they pull a report which shows which keywords are giving the best conversions, presumably because you want to include that as part of your advice and improvements, which is our 3rd task here, which is where someone in account management or an account executive role gets in touch with the client, maybe sends them an email with a report and provides them with some client advice that says, hey, here are the keywords that are converting the best, and this is what our competitors are doing, and this is the places they're leaving empty, and we should go after next month. What do you think? So that's the task, and we know that a lot of our users are really going to appreciate that because of the ability for these to be automatically allocated and assigned every single, in this case, month. But if you do quarterly contracts or even weekly contracts, weekly periods, you can have those allocated too. Another thing I just wanted to point out is how powerful we've been able to make the scheduling around these tasks. So when you're creating these templated tasks, you can do things like define whether or not they start on, for example, today. So that's the day that the task gets created. You can designate whether they get kicked off or started at the point where the period itself gets commenced. Or maybe you want to say, hey, wait 4 or 5 days to commence this task because there's a few things that we need to have come in from an end-of-month reporting point of view before we can start working on it. You can also designate that the task starts a certain number of days before the particular period expires, which is also really handy. In terms of the due date, we've got similar power. So you're able to designate, hey, something finishes a certain number of days after it starts. You could designate something needs to finish a couple of days before the period expires, or even on the deadline or the end date of the period itself. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through and I'm actually going to create this retainer as well as the first period or the first bucket of hours. Now, because I said that those hours have been approved, because of that business process piece, this is something we configured earlier, and you can certainly configure this to do as much or as little as you like, we can promptly use it to put in some comments. They want to be the best at selling to Warner Brothers characters. And we might put in some keywords, Bugs Bunny, Bug and Road Runner. So they might be the keywords that they're shooting for in their SEO plan. Again, that SEO plan, those keywords and other fields, those are completely configurable. And you can see in this example, we've got an automatic note being created here, which goes out to everyone on the team and says, yeah, awesome news, we've just signed up this client. Let me know if you've got any questions. 3 cheers sort of thing I'll skip that for the moment. You can also prompt users, you're probably familiar with this, but you can also prompt users as part of those progressions to do things like upload files, which is awesome if you want to do things like prompt the user to upload the sign-off or the purchase order or the signed contract. And you can also prompt users to perform other functions as well, such as maybe updating the customer record to create a new field or to update the status of the client themselves to convert them now to be called active. Okay, so now we've done this and we've got ourselves our first retainer. We can see that it's called SEO for the Acme Vacations. We can see that we're charging the customer $894 each month. And we know that that's made up of $795 worth of work here, pardon me, which is built in, which is part of the inclusion, and, part of the actual allowance for this particular retainer. And we can also see the inclusion here is also another $99. So those two numbers together come up to make our $894. So let's imagine for a minute that we're now going to go and do some work. We'll go in here to this particular period, so this is the only one we've created for now. And we can see a list of our tasks. We've got 3 active tasks over here. So let's say Sarah wanted to come in and log some work. So Sarah could come in here, choose that particular task, and could come in and say, looked at competitors, or I'll just call it competitor research March. And guys, so you can see some notes. Obviously, Sarah probably coming in here and saying she'd spent 45 minutes working on something. So she can come in and put that sort of information in and then save that into AffinityLive. And at this point, what we'll see is we can see in our usage report, we've now got 45 minutes worth of time billed against that particular task, which is leading keyword competitors. Let's say Malin wanted to come in here, or someone wanted to post against Malin's task to help him out. Let's say it was an email to the client, and the email to the client might say something like the top keyword conversions, and then we could have by volume and then by percentage. So in this case, Malin would have gone through and done a whole bunch of reporting and calculations. He may want to upload a spreadsheet attached to this as well to say, oh, this is where, here's my workings or the export from Google Analytics with the different numbers. And let's say that he'd spent an hour and 20 minutes working on that particular task there. So this is how easy someone just comes in, and not only from here as well, obviously users won't always be digging down into the details of these guys. They'll often just be using their work screen where they'll be able to go through and log their time with the power of stopwatches, and as well as that, the ability for them to see all of the emails they've already been tracking and to record those as well. So I can see that I've got some activity here. And for the third one, imagining with the account exec who's doing the client advice thing, I'll come through here, create the client advice, and maybe that one happens in the context of a meeting with the client. So this one might be a meeting for a couple of people to go to, and meeting here, test meeting, monthly report, data work through. And what we might be able to do here is come in and say, okay, that's going to be tomorrow between 9:30 and 10 o'clock. We can save that. That will, of course, for those of you who aren't aware, will automatically push that appointment across into your Google Calendar, Office 365 calendar, or Exchange calendar, which will then, of course, sync with your mobile phone, Outlook, and other products as well. So at this point, we've created this in here as an appointment that we need to do. And then imagining that tomorrow has now come around and it's time for us to record or put in our meeting report, we can come in here and say, okay, yep, we've actually done this work, so let's create this report for the work that we scheduled now. We did the work. Here it is. And let's say that it actually took us 45 minutes because we went a bit over time. So at this point, what I've been able to do is really quickly and easily go through. Obviously, I've done it more slowly than you normally would for the purposes of explaining it, but created a retainer based on a bunch of templated values, gone through against tasks that got pre-built automatically, and logged a bunch of time that goes in there. All right. So now you're probably thinking, okay, I've got some work that's been done against this retainer. That's really nice. Staff have gone through and logged tasks. What about if the customer calls up and raises an issue with us? Let's say they want us to do some preliminary research on some different keywords that aren't part of this, contract here. Well, the good news is we can still see that we've got a bunch of time remaining. We've used 2 and a bit hours, but we've still got a couple of hours up our sleeve. We've still got 2 hours and 10 minutes. So what I'm going to do for the purpose of the example now is I'm going to create an issue. So let's say the client's called up and said, hey, I need you to, in the case of an IT services firm, maybe it's support. If you're doing web dev, maybe they're asking you to update a page. If you're doing SEO, maybe they're asking you to do some research. If you're an accountant, maybe it's someone asking you to prepare some reports for the bank while they go in for a loan. Whatever it is, you can create these issues here, which are more the reactive, customer asks me to do something type things. And I'm able to go through, and when I create this issue, I can see that I've got a retainer listed here in the drop-down list. I say, oh, that's the one I want. I want Acme Vacations. That's the one I'm working on. I can say, yep, I'm ready to start working on that. It could be research, Maui, keyword, competition. So let's say they're looking at buying some a condo or some timeshare apartments somewhere in Maui, and they want to be able to have some research done on those. And because you're the SEO expert, they've come to us. So they come in and they say, need to look into keywords targeting cartoon and Maui holidays. So come through here and create this issue. They then say, oh, what rate do you want to charge for that? And we could say, oh, look, by default, we're going to charge that out at $2.50 an hour. And there's going to be, let's say, 3 hours worth of work going to that there. Again, we're setting issue budgets here. We're setting everything that you're used to, the ability for you to define what you're going to charge and how you're going to work. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to log some time here. So I'm going to create a note. And let's say my note is a representation of spending 45 minutes working on initial research. Wow, Maui is competitive. Hard to get onto page 1, so I can log that time. And what I want to show you is just by choosing that retainer from the drop-down list right at the beginning screen, what this means is now when I come through here and refresh my retainer, instead of having 2 hours and 10 left, I'm going to have eaten into that by 45 minutes. So you can see how I've instantly now got myself back to 1 hour and 24. In fact, it was slightly over 45 minutes. I had a few seconds on the clock too. And if I go in here, I can see that I've got not only a series of work items against those particular tasks that I already have, but I can also see the Maui research issue. And I know it's an issue because it's got that single book icon there. And you can also see the 45-minute amount that's been used up here as we've gone through and logged out time. So what I'm going to do another example, and I'm going to create another note here. And let's say that we've just spent 3.5 hours doing some really detailed analysis. Don't know how I did that so wrong. 3.5 hours, detailed analysis and report. Won't bother attaching the report for now, but that's how that would go in there. And so now I can see in real time on my contract, on my retainer itself, that I've now gone over budget. I can now see that I've got a remaining allocation that's negative. I've gone over budget here. I can see that back up on the retainer itself. So of course you might want to send the customer an invoice for the excess usage, or what you might want to do is recognizing that maybe we're towards the end of the period now or towards the end of this month and we want to maybe move some time around because we know they're not going to use as much next month. What we can do is we can actually create a whole new period. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating yet another bucket. This is a bucket for the time. I'm going to stick with my defaults to make it quick. And while I'm at it, why not create another bucket again? Why not pre-schedule or pre-allocate our work going forward months in advance? Cool, so now I've got my 3 different periods here. Each of them have an allocation built in of 5 hours. And you can see in my first period here, I've actually got an over allocation of time. So what I can do in this case, I can now, and this is the easy management of allocations, I can come in here and say, oh, you know what? I want to move some time around. So what I want to do is I want to show that I've got a bunch of unapproved time, here that needs to be potentially approved. Maybe it needs to be updated and changed. So you can go in and actually change each of the rows here and say, oh, it wasn't an hour and 20 minutes. Let's actually charge the customer an hour and 50, for example, which you can certainly do, and that changes the mathematics immediately and shows that we're now 7.5 instead of just 5. And what you can do is for things to be linked to a particular package or a period here, such as a particular issue, the system has automatically guessed and said, look, because these hours got logged during this time period, I'm automatically going to put them into this particular period. But you might look at it and go, God, that detailed project, my team just got a bit trigger happy working on that. We don't have to deliver it till next month or the next period, and they just had a lull and they were really productive, which is great, but we don't want to actually go through and charge the customer for that. So you can just pick things up just as quickly and easily as grabbing the little square with the I'll show you again, the square with the little dots in it, and you can just drag it up. And that immediately drags up either individual pieces of work, which is what these smaller grey guys are, or potentially all of the work on that issue. You can say, nah, this issue here belongs in the next month. We're going to charge the customer then for it. So the benefit of this now is I can actually go back through and look at it. And you can see that now my big 3.5 hour project has been pushed through in the next month, and this month is back under budget. Now you might remember that I didn't automatically create the invoice for this particular period here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what it looks like to create an invoice. So when you click Create Invoice from here, you get a very easy to use screen with built-in editing, so you can customize the text in these fields to be a little bit more representative of what you're doing for the client that month. Potentially you might be calling this one the Maui warm-up month. So you can give them titles that make sense. Of course, you've got the ability to put in a subject and description, and the ledger codes and tax codes all come courtesy of the ledger and tax codes you're probably already familiar with in the projects and issues area, which then feed in or connect directly to your accounting package. So if you create an invoice here, it'll automatically push that invoice, including all of the ledger codes and tax IDs, across into products like Xero, Sasu, or QuickBooks. Now I won't create the invoice in this case, but if I did, that would be how it runs through. Just automatically gets created there. All right, so I come through here. Once I've decided that I've finished with the work on this particular period, so let's say I decide that this particular guy here for March, let's say I want to approve that time, I can just tick it off and say, yep, that's approved. I'm done with that now. And what I could also do is back up when I'm looking at my retainer itself. I can go through, I can say that I'm actually done. It's not a feature we have in place yet, but I can say that I'm done and I'm able to close off or complete that particular period, which means no more time can be logged against it and it's locked down for historical purposes. I know a couple of our users in the current version have been caught out in the past where they've accidentally locked something, and the good news is that we've decoupled the locking from the approval process. So now we've made it a lot more flexible for you to reflect or the way that things really work and the way that you work with your customers. All right. Well, that's most of the stuff that I wanted to cover from the demo process here. This is a great opportunity to jump in with any questions you've got, so feel free to ask away. We love you guys to do better than the team, the clients that we had on the call this morning who asked lots of questions, so don't be shy. I'm sure that our Pacific time zone can do a better job than our Eastern and European time zones, so don't be shy. And we'd love to hear those questions. One of the ones that most people ask pretty early on, so I'll preempt that one for you, is when's this guy going to be live? And the good news is this is now very late in our QA and testing process, and we're expecting to have this version live for you ready next week. So keep an eye out. We'll certainly send you an email with an update when this is going out, when you can expect to see the update and the changes. Obviously, part of the upgrade process means automatically converting everything, which we've got under control. So basically, all you'll need to do is come in and see, wow, I've got the ability now to designate auto renewal, and I've got the ability to designate auto invoicing, and great, I can start to create some recurring tasks and even some inclusions. So there's nothing you need to do to take advantage of the upgrade. It will happen automatically, but you'll be able to then take advantage or grow on from there. Karen asked a good question about changing the titles for periods or packages. So all of these titles here, things like retainers, or whether you want to call them periods or packages or bundles or something else, all of those titles are completely configurable under the general admin settings area. So you're able to go through here, and then you're able to come in and say, for example, I don't want to call that module, periods, for example, or retainers. I want to call it something else, which might be called monthly support, for example, if you wanted to call it that. So that's how you're able to handle those guys there. So thanks for that question, Karen. That's great. Lloyd has asked us a question about doing more webinars with the new retainers module as well. So we've actually started, I'm not sure, some of our clients may not have noticed this yet, we've actually just started a whole new section in AffinityLive on our website. Sorry, I'm typing it in wrong. Under demo, AffinityLive.com/demo, where you're actually able to go through and schedule for numerous Ask an Expert sessions. We've been running a lot of these, and we'll continue to run a lot of these, and we've been really, really excited by the response we've had from our users. So by all means, come along to this website. I'm not sure if my browser's playing up, but if you go along to AffinityLive.com/demo, you're able to register for one of a number of sessions which are built around topics like activities, clients. We have a special section on contracts and retainers. We have a special section on project management. And the idea of those is that you can send people along inside your business who might be new to AffinityLive, and you can come along as an expert as well and ask details such as how do we do this or how do we do that, and you'll get some best practices insights from our staff. Adam asked a great question here. Can we add bulk retainers to multiple clients? I want to set up a bunch of clients straight away. I'm not sure if I get that one straight away, Adam. I guess what you might be getting at is, let's say you've got 30 clients and you want to put them all on a monthly plan. Is there a screen where you can just tick the names of the clients and have them apply automatically? At the moment, unfortunately not. We don't have that kind of apply this retainer template or type to multiple different customers all at once. So you would need to go through and find those customers and create the retainer against them one at a time. Sorry, that sounds like it might be a bit of a time sink for you. I guess a good thing is you've only got to do that once, and the reason that we haven't optimized for those sorts of bulk processes, particularly on the creation of retainers, is because they can do things like send invoices. We're just nervous about the consequences of making mistakes and proving to be really embarrassing. Adam asked another question, which is, with the auto creation of periods, can they also auto close on expiry? We've actually taken out, or we've deliberately chosen not to do auto closing of periods on their expiry or on their end date. The reason for that is we found that there were scenarios in a real world sense where you might have time being logged that staff are a little bit late filling out their timesheet, and you really do want to backfill it into a previous period. You might also have scenarios where you might have a quieter month of the year, and you want to be able to, if you want to be able to then put some hours from a busy month back to a previous month, particularly if they happened earlier on. The good news is, though, you don't have to really be that focused or worried about those things unless you want to, because every time somebody logs some work in AffinityLive against a particular retainer or against an issue that's linked to a retainer or a project that's linked to a retainer, we will automatically look up the date stamp, or we'll look up the timetable of those periods that are there, and we'll make sure that we drop the hours, we link the hours onto the right period. So when you're going through and logging your hours on an issue, for example, which might be tied to a retainer, those hours are going to be automatically allocated to the correct period based on when the work is logged, which should save you the need to worry too much about closing them. In fact, you could almost treat the closing process as a little bit of housekeeping over a glass of wine, just to make sure that you've invoiced the customer for any excess hours that maybe crept up when you hadn't gotten around to it. But what we're really aiming for with this new version is people like yourselves who are managing these sorts of retainer-based business processes are not the bottleneck, are not the one who has to be sitting there trigger happy on the first of the month to create all of these guys so that everyone else in the business can do work. I've had another question, which is a really good one here, saying, what if you end up with a different time period? What if you end up with a scenario where maybe the customer's really angry about the support you gave them? Maybe they said, look, I want to have, credit or something else going for them. What you could do is you could go through here on this particular period. So let's say instead of it being a month, you wanted to just edit this guy and you wanted to stretch that over until maybe the 4th of July and give them an extra couple of weeks of credit. If you wanted to do that, no problems at all. So you can just edit this one-off retainer here, make it run through to the end of the month, hit save, and then that one retainer will change its duration, but you can see it won't affect anybody else. And it also won't affect the default template here. Another concept that you might have is, what about if you're creating a retainer, for example, and you decide, the customer calls you up and says, look, we want to do more hours in the future, or we want to ramp things up a bit. You can say, sure, no problem. Let's upgrade this for you. So instead of being 5 hours, you might negotiate with them to have 10 hours worth of work, and you might charge them $1,600 for that. And when you do that, you can save that retainer period there, and you'll notice a couple of things. In this case, not only have we created a new period with the new amount, but we've actually updated the template to reflect that new value on an ongoing basis. And we did that deliberately because when you're creating something new, often you want that to follow through. So you've still got maximum flexibility around all of those sorts of things. Another aspect that people sometimes wanted to seek flexibility around was when they're creating an invoice, what if this SEO Moz license here isn't $99 this month? What if it's changed? What if because of the usage, or you took advantage of a temporary usage package, maybe it's higher? The good news is you can just come through and change those details really quickly and really easily, and they'll take effect and flow through automatically onto the invoice here. So where you've got variability like that, that's an example where you'll probably want to not automatically invoice. Again, we've optimized flexibility for you as a user and to make it really easy for you to go through and keep track and generate the invoices you need. A great question here from Adam. Can you push an invoice to zero without sending the client sending it directly to the client from AffinityLive? The answer is yes. In fact, that's how most of our users use AffinityLive. So you connect AffinityLive to zero, you create your invoice here, you choose not to send the invoice. You still create it, but you choose not to send it. And then we push it across to zero, and it's up to you then to potentially approve that invoice. And if you want to add anything to it, maybe do some discounts, do any exchange rate variations, you can then resend it out to the client from there. Another question here, can you set the date for the auto invoice to send on a particular day of the month, such as the last working day? The way it works at the moment, Rob, is that we send it, if we're going to auto invoice, we do it on the same day that we auto renew. And you can specify that to be a particular day, a particular number of days before the end of a particular period. So that's probably a good way to sort of communicate how we do that. If there's something that if there's another way that you need to invoice, certainly this module is not going to be standing still. This is a major upgrade, but we're keen to take on board these real business requirements that our users have and drop things in there, particularly if they're relatively minor and certainly don't cause confusion for other users. We've got a great question here from Lloyd saying, can you have a retainer that's just hourly based rather than a fixed fee? Absolutely right. So sorry I didn't do a really good job of explaining that earlier. What you could do is, and I'll just show you an example of that now. So let's go back to Appy, and let's say that this customer is just going to be charged for whatever hours they actually use. That's where I can go in and create a retainer. And then instead of considering it to be a prepaid retainer with a bundle of hours attached to it, I'm going to designate that this is going to be a postpaid retainer. And then I can designate what I want my hourly rate to be. And I can choose whether or not I want the rate for those hours to either use the contract rate, which is this built-in rate here, or whether I want to retain the objects rate. So if you go through and create an issue and designate a particular hourly rate for that invoice, we can keep the dollar value of those and build them up. So that's how you do your post-paid arrangements rather than your prepaid arrangements. Another good question here is how would you handle a scenario where you do an implementation of SEO for 10 hours and then a monthly retainer for 3 hours? So that's a really good one. There's two ways you could do that. So you could either go through and create, you could either go through and have a project or an issue for the implementation phase, and then you could have your retainer just handle the ongoings. Or alternatively, what you could do is you could actually go through, and when you create your retainers, you can actually choose to create more than one at a time. So you could choose to create 2 of them, for example. And when you do that, the system will then prompt you and say, okay, do you want to create 1 or 2, and what hours do you want to have in here? That's where you might choose, for example, in the first period to have 10 hours, and then a subsequent period you might have 1. The template here gets updated every time you create a new one. So what you would do is you create your 10 hours, which is what I've just done here, for example, and then I could create a new one, which is just for 3 hours on it. So that now is back down to my 3-hour territory. Maybe I'm charging $500 for that. And so that becomes, if you like, my ongoing business as usual retainer here. Great question from Karen here. If you create multiple periods at once with recurring tasks, will they all display at once for users, and how will the titles be the task be different for the retainers and periods? So when you create multiple retainers, normally you do them for a particular customer, and then you would create a series of tasks for that particular retainer for that customer, like I've done here with my SEO orientated things. The way that a user sees that is on their schedule screen, which is probably the easiest way to show you. If I come over and look at Sarah's schedule, we can see that we've got 2 different tasks here, but we can see that they belong for, in this case they're for the same contract, but they're different time periods. We can see one of them is March, and then one of them is the later period here. So we're able to go through and see those and see the separation of them. Normally what you would have is you would have different, the different client name here is something that your users would see, and they certainly see that information as well on their work screen. So whenever a user's on their work screen, you're able to see all of the different clients that work is being done for over on the right-hand side here. This data is a little bit dummy because we're just on a test account, of course, but that's the distinction there. Kara's asked another good question. Will there be issues with existing data? The answer to that is no. We've been really battle testing, and we've actually been using sort of our dev environment to battle test the conversion process to make sure that whenever you go, when we do the upgrade process, we'll be able to slot into this new model. The reality is that the current model of the way that we've handled contracts and retainers, for those of you who are using it, is very rudimentary and very basic. This new model has a lot more flexibility. So in a sense, what we're doing is we're taking something that's fairly small and got rough edges and putting it into the middle of a beautiful big swimming pool. And we're confident that we're not going to have to knock any edges off because we've got so much more flexibility and space. Good question here from Rob. If you change the dates of the activity to a different period, will it reallocate accordingly? So the idea here is if you, the allocation of time is automatically set at the point when the time is logged. And if you move the dates around up here, if you make a period here run maybe end earlier, another one finish early, start earlier, then you'll want to move that time around using the manage allocation screen, which, as I showed earlier, is really quite a simple screen to use because you're really just dragging and dropping time using a technique like this. It's really easy to move time around. Question here from Renee. Can we choose to show non-billable activity as well on the invoice? So when it goes out to invoice, we can choose to not bill the hours for meeting time but still show clients that we've done a whole lot of work. I'm going to have to get back to you on that one, Renee. I'm not sure right now whether we've included that at this stage of the release, but that's probably a good one. I'll make sure that Malin from my team is able to follow up with you about that and talk to you to get a bit of a sense there in terms of the reporting details. Adam's asked a great question here. What's the simplest and quickest way to track something that's applied directly to a retainer package? So really the best way to do that, this is one of the features we still need to implement before next week. But what you'll basically want to do, Adam, is the super quickest way is a customer rings, and you'll search up here for Acme. and you log your hours by coming down. You don't even need to search for the retainer. You can just find the customer name here, come in and say, I want to log some time here for this guy at Acme. And then we'll use our smarts and logic. And let's say it's 45 minutes. We'll use our smarts and logic to automatically assign that to the particular retainer itself, the right period here. Did I hit save probably? No, I didn't. And the one feature we'll be dropping in is a drop-down list that you might have seen on the projects module, which will allow you to see a series of the tasks that are underway underneath that particular retainer, so that if it was a task that was under a retainer rather than just the retainer itself, you'd be able to link that work in. And that's a really quick and easy way to keep track of that time. Jacob asked a good question here, which is in response to the detailed question earlier about whether or not you would do your setup for an SEO project in, or the setup phase for SEO as part of a retainer, and then the ongoing also as part of the retainer, but with a different period amount. I guess to an extent, Jacob, that advice of what you could do maybe isn't really a representation of best practice. The key with these retainers is they're really designed to be for ongoing work and ongoing activity. The other thing that's worth communicating with them is that these retainers really, in terms of how they work, are designed to automatically, or at least with a high degree of ease, create new periods and roll on. So where it would be a bad idea to follow that advice, or at least it's possible to do this, but I wouldn't recommend it, would be, let's say you've got an SEO project, you send you work with a customer and you think it's going to take you 3 weeks to get their keywords and to set up a couple of link building programs and other things that you do, and you feel like 3 weeks is fine, and then of course the customer gets busy, they don't answer your emails, they take their time to decide on their keywords, and as a result you end up getting to the end of that 3-week period, which is defined in the retainer here, and bang, all of a sudden now you're moving on to your business as usual type period. So I would actually recommend that you still use a project or an issue for that initial establishment or setup, because it is a project. You're going in with your eyes open. The customer's signed off on a proposal. There's a series of different steps and dependencies to follow through, which the projects module is well suited for. And then once you actually pull the trigger on whatever the ongoing component is, then you would use a retainer. Having said that as well, there is no reason why you can't have an establishment project and then you can also have a retainer that kicks off halfway through the establishment project. So if the establishment's about getting things set up, but then you decide, hey, it's time to start charging the customer ongoing for the reporting, or there's some third-party costs like SEO mods and you want to include those, you can certainly do that as well. That's the great thing about retainers being linked directly to a customer and now being independent of the work that they do. They don't have to just live downstream from projects and issues like they used to. All right, we've only got another couple of minutes to go, so now's a great chance to jump in with any last questions you've got. While I'm waiting for any last questions, if there are some stragglers, one thing that I can do is, one thing I wanted to let you know is to keep an eye on our blog. We'll also email all of you to let you know once this new feature ships. So keep an eye on our blog where we've got some more help content, and also make sure you check out that demo page at AffinityLive.com/demo to sign up for those webinars, just because we'll be able to encourage and train and answer questions for not only you, but also your users on a regular basis. So they're free, they're open to anybody. Those Ask an Expert sessions are really worth taking advantage from. All right, one last question before I've got a jet here. Adam's jumped in. Let's say you had three different support plans, basic, standard, premium, and a client upgraded to a higher plan. Would you adjust the existing retainer periods, or would you stop it and start a brand new retainer? Honestly, Adam, what I would do in that case is I would create my new period, or I would edit my template, and I would modify them to reflect the new tier that that customer is on, the new inclusions of hours and things of that nature. You'll notice here as well that we've also got the ability to have custom fields. So I've actually got a custom field here called plan, and you're able to go through and obviously change that. And I would also, I would just go through and modify that retainer template rather than changing or killing a retainer and starting a whole new one. The main reason for that is after a while, you're actually going to have a whole bunch of useful activity and history going back through the retainer listing here. And I just think keeping that history, keeping any sign-off and attachments is really quite handy and valuable. All right, well, thanks very much, everyone, once again. We've run out of time for today. I look forward to shipping this out to you early next week, and keep an eye out on your email for updates. We've also got a couple more tricks up our sleeve before the end of quarter, fitting in there with our product roadmap. So if you want to peer over the horizon there, don't hesitate to jump back onto our blog and look at our product roadmap post, and you can see a few more of the things we've got coming down the pipeline for you. So thanks again. We'll look forward to getting this out and getting your feedback on the way through. See you later. Bye.